as we reflect once more on the life and times of Mdladlana. We are joined now by SAFTU Secretary General, Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi. Mr. Vavi, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So much to reflect on, but I have to say this, that just 7 days ago, we were here covering the funeral of former minister, former governor, Tito Mboweni, and we saw you share your comments as well at that funeral. And 7 days later, you're commenting on the passing of the man who took the reins from him in the Labour Department in 1998. I mean, that must be something incredibly difficult to reflect on.
Well, that's quite indeed a difficult moment for us in the trade union movement who served with both Tito Mboweni and Membathisi Mdladlana in the trade union movement. I'm here in Cape Town to bid him farewell, just like I was in Tzaneen last weekend, to bid farewell to Tito Mboweni, a unionist and a pioneer in terms of the transformation of the labor market in South Africa, moved it from apartheid era into a democratic era under the foundations of the Constitution. And Membathisi Mdladlana, who we are remembering today in a special way in his funeral, was the minister who took over the foundations. If Tito Mboweni laid the foundation, Membathisi Mdladlana built on that foundation to enforce the labor laws in South Africa and to champion the compliance across the board with a bias to the most vulnerable workers who have weaker trade unions to protect them, who cannot rely on the strong shop steward movement to protect them. And he was there as the minister, walking, driving, no helicopter, driving and walking from farm to farm, and from informal sector to the next informal sector, and to remind the employers of their obligations to the workers under democracy, the obligation to treat workers fairly, and to ensure that the deductions of the UIF are passed over to the Department of Employment and Labor, so that no worker can find himself in a situation where, after being dismissed and or on the retirement age, he established that his pension funds, his UIF have not been passed over and is now having to live a life of a pauper. Membathisi went to farm to remind employers that they have an obligation to ensure that they pay workers for overtime work. They have lunchtime breaks, they have tea time breaks, and women and men have both maternity and paternity leaves, and that the employers and the unions must have a relationship. That is naturally conflictual in the context of them contesting what we call the social surplus value, but we have a responsibility to one another to build a relationship and to make sure that their business or their relationships are connected within the spirit of a constitution that first and foremost is premised on respect for worker rights and sees worker rights as human rights. And we will miss him, and we miss him dearly, and because we never accepted and understood why a high-performing minister was removed from his position and posted in foreign lands where his contribution, or when his contribution was dearly needed in South Africa today. And we're happy that that era inside the ANC that impacted so negatively in the whole country appeared to have passed. And even though corruption is worse than any other period in the history of this country today, but at least we now have a new minister, which we want to salute as well, who is starting very well, we must say, conducting the same raids, ensuring that the employers, the workers, know their obligations and their rights, and that there is no reversal back to the era of near slavery and feudal relationships in the farms between workers and the employers. So it's a sad day that we bidding farewell to the Minister of Labour, who played such an important role in our labor market in the country. But I must go beyond that, Naledi. This is an educator. Perhaps today I'm wearing a tie and a neat suit to remember that we are also bidding farewell to a principal, a school principal of the old days, a disciplinarian, a person who scorned against the current practices. The two of them I want to highlight. According to the South African Educators Council, they are reporting that in 2022, they had to dismiss 48 educators for sexual misconduct, 36 for impregnating young school girls. And Mdladlana came from the era where teachers were the parents who spent more time with the students as the parent, and who parents could leave in their hands and look on the other side, dealing with all the stress.
Yeah. Mr. Vavi, you're still there? I'm listening to you. Apologies, excuse me. I want to ask this, though, Mr. Vavi, before I let you go, because you've said quite a mouthful, and I think what really stands out for me is that over the past week since the passing of the former minister, one of the things that I've noted is, you know, this constant theme of being talked about as a salt of the earth individual. You know, you talk about him being a teacher and the commitment to community. A minister who drove from farm community over and over again without a helicopter, but was a salt of the earth leader. What do you think is the lesson that we take from his life, and as we reflect on how we deal with collective bargaining, especially in the new era?
Well, whilst he was a strict disciplinarian as an educator, somebody who espoused those values that made teachers such a special profession in South Africa for many, many decades. But at the same time, he was a hard-nosed negotiator, somebody who never, ever prioritized his own interest at the expense of the teachers. Never saw him as the president, the founding president of SAFTU, advancing his own personal interest above the interest of the educators and the profession, the educators' profession. Somebody who was very worried, for example, that in South Africa today, we see about 48 some years to 52% of our kids disappearing in the system before they reach grade 12. He was worried that thousands and thousands of grade 11 and 10 kids are being killed out of the system because the system puts pressure on the principal to have and to celebrate a very high matric pass rate without looking at the system as a whole, without looking at the fact that 81% of our kids reach grade 4 without reading with the meaning.
Yeah, and the statistics are so telling about the work that needs to be done, particularly when we focus on who it's impacting and not the end data. Thank you so much for that reminder, and we appreciate you speaking to us before that memorial service. Absolutely. The General Secretary there of SAFTU, Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, this morning as he pays tribute to now the late former Labour Minister, Mr. Membathisi Mdladlana. All right.